Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking another look at our red-black Vampire Madness deck, which got some upgrades with Eldritch Moon, as well as some new cards from Kaladesh that synergize nicely. So the idea behind the deck is to play lots of vampires, which have a lot of synergies between them. We also have a lot of madness cards, so we can pay an alternate cost with the madness if we discard the card in question. So we also need a way to discard the card in the first place. So we've got a lot of discard outlets is what they're called, which allow us to discard cards from our hand. Then we can discard the madness cards and pay a cheaper cost usually, which allows us to also not lose any card advantage, since usually discarding cards comes with a cost of losing cards, but if they have madness, that's no longer a problem. So let's take a look at the entire deck. Starting out with 2 copies of Insolent Neonate, the only 1-drop vampire in the deck, is also a menace creature, so can get in for a few points of damage when the opponent doesn't have enough blockers out. And also an instant speed discard outlet, so we can discard a card, sacrifice a Neonate and draw a card. And this also allows us to play madness cards as early as turn 2, which is why the Neonate on turn 1 is such a nice play. We've got a Lightning Axe, which is another discard outlet, and we can also pay 5 generic mana instead of discarding a card, but usually we're pretty happy to discard a card in this deck to deal 5 damage to a creature at instant speed for single red, so a nice removal spell that can deal with most creatures in the game. We've got Asylum Visitor, which is both a vampire and a madness card, can also provide some card advantage later in the game. Heir of Falkenrath, also a discard outlet, and transforms into Heir of the Night, which is a 3/2 flyer that is good at closing out the game. Olivia's Bloodsworn can give all our vampires haste for single red, can also give himself haste, so we can, for example, play him on turn 3 and then pay red mana to give him haste and get in for 2. Can't block, but since we're an aggressive deck, we don't really mind. Olivia's Dragoon is another discard outlet that grants the Dragoon flying until end of turn, which is nice. Unfortunately, the mana base doesn't support the Stromkirk Condemned in this deck, which would be a great fit, both being a discard outlet and a way to pump up basically all our creatures. But the double black in the casting cost is a little prohibitive, and since we don't want to be playing a ton of tap lands, we are choosing not to play the Condemned, even though it's a pretty powerful card if you can get it down early. Then we've got 3 copies of Furyblade Vampire, which is the replacement for the Ravenous Bloodseeker. The Furyblade Vampire is a little less flexible since you can't choose when to discard, but is overall a little more powerful since she has Trample and gets an additional point of power when you do discard a card. Then we've got 2 copies of Smuggler's Copter, which is a great addition from Kaladesh, since it's a discard outlet, so enables madness, and goes well into any aggressive deck as a 3/3 flyer, and we can crew it with any creature in our deck. Also 1 copy of Key to the City, which is another discard outlet that can make one of our creatures unblockable until end of turn, which works great with the creature that we're about to see. Also allows us to draw a card if we pay 2 generic mana when the Key to the City untaps during our untap phase, so we can also get rid of some lands in the late game and hope to draw some more action. And works very well with Bloodmad Vampire, which is a 3 mana 4/1, but we can also pay its madness cost of just 1 and a red, and whenever the vampire deals damage to a player, we can put a +1/+1 counter on it, so keeps growing, and so works very well with Key to the City, since it doesn't have any built-in evasion, so making it unblockable until end of turn is very powerful. We also have Olivia Mobilized for War. Great synergy in this deck, 3 mana 3/3 flyer, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can discard a card, so another discard outlet, and if we do, we can put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and give it haste until end of turn, and also becomes a vampire, although that doesn't really matter in this deck since we only have vampires and Smuggler's Copters. Then 2 copies of Stensia Masquerade, which is another payoff card for playing all of these vampires. 3 mana enchantment, attacking creatures we control have first strike, so also counts for non-vampire creatures. And whenever a vampire we control deals damage to a player, we can put a +1/+1 counter on it. Also has madness, so we can also pay its madness cost. So this is a great card in the deck. It got a little worse since we've added Smuggler Copters, since now we have fewer vampires in the deck. And also we don't really want to draw multiple copies of Stensia Masquerade, since that probably means that we don't have a ton of creatures in play, and of course the Masquerade is at its most powerful when we have lots of creatures out. Then some removal spells in Fiery Temper, which is 3 damage at instant speed for 3 mana, or madness of just a single red, making it basically Lightning Bolt, which is a great card of course. 1 copy of Unlicensed Disintegration, which does have 3 artifacts in the deck to go with it. So if we do have an artifact out, we deal 3 damage in addition to destroying any creature. Then Bloodhall Priest, another great addition from Eldritch Moon, a madness cost of 1 a black and a red for a 4/4 creature, and whenever the priest enters the battlefield or attacks, if we're empty-handed, we can deal 2 damage to a creature or player. And then finally Incorrigible Youths, which is a 5 mana 4/3 with haste, but most of the time we're paying the madness cost of just 2 and a red, so if we can get these out on turn 3, we get a 4/3 haste, which is very powerful. Then our mana base, we've got 9 swamps and 10 mountains, so very few tap lands, 2 Smoldering Marsh and 2 Dragonskull Summit. So this does mean that we don't really support any double red or double black cards in the deck, hence no copy of Stromkirk Condemned and no copies of Liliana or Kalitas for example, but this does make our mana base much smoother, so we can play all our lands untapped and curve out nicely. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks pretty good. We've got 2 discard outlets, a nice madness card and a Bloodsworn to give our guys haste. Question is, what 2-drop do we lead with? Could be the Copter, but then we can't madness out the Bloodhall Priest on turn 3. Opponent also with their own Copter, maybe a red-white vehicles deck. So let's see, if we play the Heir of Falkenrath turn 2, we can madness out the Bloodhall Priest turn 3. And then turn 4 we could go Bloodsworn plus Copter. If we go Copter here, next turn we don't have a very mana efficient turn unfortunately, since we would just be playing a 2-drop or a Bloodmad Vampire. So I actually like playing out the Heir of Falkenrath here and saying go. And then next turn we can madness out the priest. Also, if our opponent crews a Copter and attacks, we do have the option of discarding a card and trading with the Copter. So our opponent has to consider that as well. Instead they just have a Harness Lightning to take care of our vampire. But unless they have a 1-drop creature here, they can't crew the Copter. Alright, so we lost our main discard outlet. So here we could also go Bloodsworn, give it haste. Or we can just play the Vampire or the Copter. I think I like playing the Copter here, since next turn we can crew the Copter with the Bloodsworn and then madness out the Bloodmad Vampire. So let's play the Copter, leave up a red mana to represent a Lightning Axe and other 1 mana removal spells. Say go, and hope our opponent doesn't have a great turn here. Handwire Garrison to crew the Copter. This is a pretty scary card. So if we go with our plan of playing the Bloodsworn and crewing the Copter to madness out the Vampire, then the Vampire would have to hope to block the Garrison. Opponent would still get 2 1/1s, which would be annoying leftovers. A Lightning Axe is interesting. I think I like this. So we can Lightning Axe the Garrison and madness out the Priest. And then we can decide if we want to crew the Copter on or stay on defense in case our opponent has some haste creature. I think I like just crewing at that point. Do we have any other options? I think this is the best one since I definitely want to get rid of this if I can. So let's Lightning Axe, discard, and then at this point this is our best play. And then we might as well crew the Copter to get in. And maybe discard a land. Depends what we draw here. Olivia. Alright, so I think we discard a swamp. 4 lands is plenty in this deck. Could have maybe played a swamp over the mountain, but with the activations from the Bloodsworn, having more red mana available is nice. And we also have a lot more red cards than black cards. And no double black casting costs to be worried about. Declaration in Stone, one of the few answers in red-white that we will often see out of the vehicles deck, but not the end of the world. So now we can play the Bloodsworn to crew the Copter. Hope it doesn't get killed for 2 mana here. And then try to madness out the Bloodmad Vampire. And looks like our opponent does have something. Nope, they're just trying to scare us. Alright, madness this out. And I guess we have to hope our opponent doesn't have any Twin Bolt kind of removal spells, since that would be pretty painful here. Alright, so have a pretty good hand here. And we're ahead on board, still have a clue we can sacrifice at some point. Inventor's Apprentice, so finally found a crew member to crew the Copter. But we could shoot that down with the Fiery Temper next turn. Maybe our opponent also has a Fiery Temper here, who knows. Although most red-white decks don't have Fiery Temper. Our opponent with a difficult decision, and they end up discarding Sky Sovereign, which would have been pretty good, but they might be missing the 5th land. And if they had trouble crewing the Copter, then crewing the Sky Sovereign is even more difficult. They also played a Renegade Freighter, so if we just kill the Apprentice, our opponent might be out of creatures to crew their vehicles with. So we drew Asylum Visitor, which is interesting. So I would like to use Fiery Temper on the Apprentice, so that uses up 1 red mana, which means we probably end up either playing the Bloodsworn and give it haste, or we can actually just play the Visitor and give it haste with the Bloodsworn that's already in play. I think I like that play the most. Could also play out Olivia, which is another option, as well as Fiery Temper. But I think giving the Asylum Visitor haste is more appealing. So let's do that. And then we have to crew the Copter by tapping our 2-powered creature here. So we get in for an extra point of damage, essentially. discard Fiery Temper. And I think we do play out our land here, even though it's another mountain, since we might need to use all our mana next turn. Also still have a clue. Opponent with land number 5. And no attacks from the opponent. Another Bloodsworn, so we can only play one creature that we have in hand currently and give it haste, but if we're also creating a Copter, then the haste doesn't really matter, so might as well sacrifice a clue at that point. Found an Heir of Falkenrath, which we can play and give haste, or just play and crew the Copter. Seems better. And we could still draw into a Fiery Temper that we can discard with Madness as well. Not sure what our opponent can have. Archangel Avacyn is not bad, but is not gonna save them here, since we have multiple lethal creatures. Alright, did not find Fiery Temper, but opponent can only block one guy and still takes a lethal damage. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks alright. 2 Copters is a little awkward, but can still play turn 2, crew at turn 3. Hand would be a lot better if we had a mountain, so we could play the Neonate turn 1. Instead we're stuck with 2 swamps and a Dragonskull Summit, because now we have to play Copter turn 2 and crew it with the Neonate turn 3, while if we could play the Neonate turn 1, crew the Copter turn 2, then we could also play the Youths on turn 3. Opponent with a turn 2 Sylvan Advocate, and now we draw the mountain. But yeah, at this point we can play the Copter, and mountain's actually not bad, since next turn we can play the Neonate to crew the Copter and then Madness out a Fiery Temper to deal with the Advocate. Opponent hits us for 2. A Woodland Cemetery into Vessel of Nascency. So black-green Delirium deck, most likely. So for a black and a green, there's no removal spells we should really be afraid of. We drew Furyblade Vampire, which is interesting. So this would also allow us to crew the Copter, and I think is a bit better than playing out a Neonate, since it's more mana efficient here. So we can play out the Furyblade Vampire, and then crew the Copter, attack, and Madness out the Fiery Temper. Alright, sounds like a plan. And I think Sylvan Advocate is a worthy recipient of a Fiery Temper. So we're not discarding to the Furyblade, but we will be discarding to the Copter after we see what we draw. Stensia Masquerade. Not the greatest with Smuggler's Copter, but still a decent card. And next turn we can have a pretty great turn by madnessing out the Youths to the Furyblade Vampire. Opponent's gonna sacrifice Vessel end of turn. And they find a blob that they could take here. Or just a land if they need that. Let's see what ends up in the graveyard. Alright, they took the blob. And they have land, instant, enchantment and creature, so they already have delirium. So that is kind of a problem. So next turn this will make a 3/3 when it attacks. We could Madness out the Masquerade, but I think we want to wait with that until we have more vampires in play. So I think we just Madness out the Incorrigible Youths. Leave up both the red and black mana. Although I guess now we have to play the Neonate main phase 1 to crew the Copter, since we want to be attacking with both the Copter and the Furyblade. So crew here. And then move to combat. Discard to the Furyblade. Cast this, and we are attacking for a healthy amount here. Maybe our opponents should consider trading. And we will loot. And another Youths. So I think it's between the Copter and the Youths that we want to discard here. I think Masquerade will be decent. But I think we'll go with the Copter here. And let's see if our opponent blocks or wants to keep their delirium creature around. They will trade with the Youths. Alright, that's fine. We've got more where that came from. And we get to keep our Madness Enabler. Also have the Neonate as another enabler potentially. Although it's doing a pretty good job of crewing the Copter. Opponent now with a Kindly Stranger, which they can't yet activate. So let's see. Think we want to Madness out the Youths with the Furyblade Vampire. And then crew the Copter with the Neonate attack. Hope to maybe find another Fiery Temper. Question is, do we play out a land? I think we do in case we find another 2 casting cost Madness card. So yeah, let's crew the Copter. And discard the Youths. Attack with everyone. And their opponent's forced to block here. Yes. Alright, so I think we discard the Masquerade here. And then we can cast the Bloodsworn main phase 2. Opponent is forced to block. And if they block a Trampler, they still take trample damage, but blocking the Youths is also not great since we just get to eat the Kindly Stranger for free. So they do decide to trade with the Furyblade Vampire, and here we can just run out Bloodsworn. Even if our opponent has a Languish, we still have the Youths as a follow-up. So we don't have to be afraid of a sweeper effects. Opponent with 6 mana. They have to do a pretty good job of stabilizing this turn. Woodland Bellower could be step 1. Could find a Reclamation Sage for the Copter perhaps. But then they still take lethal from the Bloodsworn. And there we go. So our opponent was actually pretty close to stabilizing here. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which I think is keepable thanks to the key to the city providing a discard outlet. Is a bit slow, I guess, since our discard outlet is not a creature, but we've got lands and spells, so a land is also a welcome draw. So turn 2 we have to decide if we want to run out a visitor or the key to the city. I don't hate running out the key since that allows us to madness out a priest, but if we play the visitor we can also just play out Olivia turn 3, which is not bad. Opponent on black-white kind of indicates a more controlling deck, in which case madnessing out creatures end of turn is also pretty valuable. So I don't hate running out the key to the city here. And then next turn madnessing out Bloodhall Priest end of turn. Otherwise we're playing the Asylum Visitor and then we're not playing the key to the city for a few turns. So yeah, let's just run out a key and see what happens. And then on our next upkeep we could actually pay 2, since then we have enough mana to still madness out the Asylum Visitor. Now a wastes from our opponent, so probably means they have a number of Eldrazi in their deck. And we see a Syndicate Trafficker, which is not a card I expected here. Does not really go into a control deck, so maybe our opponent is on something else. Let's play out Smoldering Marsh to play around Thalia Heretic Cathar, making our non-basic lands come into play tapped, since our opponent's playing white. And I think we just say go, and perhaps try to ambush the Syndicate Trafficker with one of our madness creatures. Land number 4. Opponent does go to combat, and I think we go for it. There's not too many removal spells our opponent could have here. Although I guess we can't really ambush the Trafficker since we would be making it unblockable with Key to the City, so never mind that. But we can still madness out the Bloodhall Priest end of turn here. So we will make this unblockable, discard a priest, and cast it. Meanwhile, our opponent also played Alchemist's Vial. So here I think we will pay 2 to draw a card. And I think we will try to attack, unless our opponent wants to sack the Vial. And I think the plan is to madness out a Bloodmad Vampire end of turn. Could try to ambush the Trafficker and just trade, but our opponent now has an artifact in play that they can sacrifice to the Trafficker. Could also madness out a Fiery Temper, but same goes there. Can make it indestructible until end of turn. Alright, Kalitas, Trader of Gat, is kind of an annoying card. So they attack with the Trafficker, we'll let that happen. And then, end of turn, madness out the Bloodmad. Here you can take a look at Kalitas. which did not make our deck since our mana base did not really support it, but now we do have lots of black mana in play. So let's see, do we want to pay 2? I think we do. Try to find a clean answer to Kalitas. Leave up as much red mana as possible. So did not find a great answer to Kalitas. Could just make our creatures unblockable and try to race it, but a life-linking creature is kind of difficult to race. Probably madnessing out more Bloodmad Vampires is not a bad idea. But we do have to be careful that we don't let our creatures die to Kalitas and make a bunch of zombies. But I do like attacking with both. Let's see if our opponent sacks the Alchemist Vial here. They do, so the Bloodmad can't attack. But we will be attacking with the Priest here. Opponent takes it. So now the question is, do we run out one of our other creatures like the Neonates? We can still then madness out the Bloodmad or the Visitor. Or do we just keep cards in hand to potentially play around the sweeper effect? Maybe running out the Neonate is fine here. But we don't really want to be sacrificing it, since then we would give our opponent a zombie token. But it does a good job of blocking the Syndicate Trafficker, I guess. And we could also block Kalitas with our Neonates plus use Fiery Temper, although just trading for a Neonate is probably better. Alright, opponent tries to cast a Marionette Master, so whenever an artifact they control is put into a graveyard, we lose life equal to the Marionette Master's power, so no artifacts in play yet, but they can make servo tokens. Or they can put +1/+1 counters on the Master. Alright, they decide to make Master into a 4/6. And no attacks, so let's madness out another Bloodmad, I believe. And now we can start using Key to the City to make our creatures unblockable to get in for damage. And we will be paying 2 here. Again, leave a red mana untapped. Alright, another Fiery Temper. So if we wanted to, we could discard to the key, madness out Fiery Temper plus discard with a Neonate, and use both Fiery Tempers to take out Kalitas. But what if we just point those at our opponent? That's 6 points of burn already. So we just need to get in for 6 more points of damage. Which is probably not that difficult. So let's see here. We can also play out the Olivia's Bloodsworn, give it haste to fly in for 2. The only problem is if we use a key to make one of our Bloodmads unblockable, then we have to decide if we want to use Fiery Temper, and if we point that at their opponent, then they know what we're trying to do, and then next turn they can potentially start attacking with their life-linking creatures, which could be a problem. If we attack with everyone, make one of the 4/1s unblockable, opponents can eat or Bloodhall Priest, trade with Trafficker on the other Bloodmad, so that would not be great. So yeah, I think we definitely want to make one of the Bloodmads unblockable here. And I think we use the Fiery Temper here and point it at our opponent. And then attack with just the Bloodmad Vampire. And we could play Asylum Visitor, but I think we keep the potential of Fiery Temper in hand. And this way we also play around a potential sweeper our opponent could have, since they could still be a Languish deck for all we know. Eldrazi Displacer can prevent one of our creatures from attacking next turn by blinking it. So after we make it unblockable with Key to the City, they can blink it with Displacer. But we can also play out the Bloodsworn attack with it, and then that plus Fiery Temper should be enough. So let's see, can we afford to pay 2? So we have to pay 3 to play this and give it haste, and 1, so we should be able to pay 2 here. Make sure to leave up all our red mana. A Lightning Axe is a clean answer to Kalitas, but I don't think we need it. Although our opponent, I guess, could still have a Murder, but same goes with activating Displacer, it only gets rid of 1 creature. So I think if we just play the Bloodsworn, give it haste, and then make one of our Bloodmads unblockable, that should be enough. So attack with this plus this, and then use the key, madness out a Fiery Temper, and hope our opponent can't gain life here at instant speed, is my guess. So they use Displacer. So they decide to blink the Vampire, so it's no longer unblockable. But we're still getting in for 2 in the air, plus Fiery Temper for 3. So that should be enough here. Alright, so Key to the City definitely did a lot of work this game, both being a discard outlet and making our creatures unblockable. Alright, I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.